boys and girls. I hope y'all got y'all's Noah and the Ark packages last week. I hope y'all been enjoying them. We talked about Noah and the Ark last week, so I thought this week and probably next week we'll talk about Moses. We won't be able to do Moses in one story because Moses was just too exciting. He had too many adventures for us to try to fit it all in one session here. So we're just going to start out today talking about Moses as a baby. I know y'all have all heard the story about Moses' mother putting him in the basket and putting him in the river and sending him down the river. But I want to talk a few minutes about why she done that. Back in that time when Moses was born, the Egyptians, the Pharaoh over Egypt, he decided that there was too many Israelites. There's just too many of them. I don't know, he was afraid that they would overtake them one day or if they would join forces with one of their enemies, but he just got afraid that there was just too many of them and he was going to have to do something about that. So he decided that every baby boy, just the boys that was born, would be killed. So that was the decree he made. So there was two midwives, and I guess you could kind of consider them like nurses, that would go and they would help the Hebrew women to deliver the babies. So he told these midwives they were to kill these babies. If it was a boy, he was to kill them when they were born. If it was a girl, they could let them live. So the midwives, it said that they feared God and that they didn't do it. So when Pharaoh got wind that these midwives had not killed these baby boys like he had told them to, he summoned them to come to the palace. So when they get to the palace, he asked them, why didn't you do what I told you to do? And they go on to tell him, making up an excuse. And they said, well, these Hebrew women, these Israelites have these babies before we can get there. They just have them too fast. They have them on their own before we can even get there. So, it's not our fault. So he decides then that every baby boy that's born is to be thrown into the Nile River. Since midwives didn't do their job, now they've got to throw them in the river. So that's where we come to today. And I'm going to read a few verses out of Exodus, and it says, now a man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months, but when she could hide him no longer, she got a basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. So it says she got a basket, and she put what they call pitch or tar around it. Now, if you remember last week when we talked about Noah's Ark, the pitch is what they put on the ark. And what pitch does is it seals it. Whatever you put it on, it seals it and makes it waterproof. So Moses' mother, loving him like she did, she made sure she put that pitch and that tar all the way around that basket so that the water couldn't get into him. So I want you to think about that just for a minute. You think about Moses' mother, and you think about her going down to the river with her baby boy, and the thoughts of having to put her baby boy in this basket and send him down the river to who knows what would happen to him. But you have to remember that this was his only chance of survival. This was the last thing that she knew to do, that he might possibly be spared. So you can imagine her being down by the river with Moses' sister. You can imagine her loving on him and kissing on him and telling him that she loves him. And then you can just nearly see her putting him down in the basket, making sure he was all snug in there, and pushing him out into the water. And it says that she asked his sister to stand at a distance and watch and see what happened to him. So, being a mother myself, I think, well, she probably told her daughter to stand there and watch because she probably needed to go back home and have a meltdown. because she was heartbroken. She had to have been heartbroken that she was having to do this. So it goes on to say that Moses' sister is watching. She's watching him float down the river there, making sure he don't tump over or, get hung up in some reeds or something. She's watching him. And it says that Pharaoh's daughter was down at the river bathing. And so that's not a coincidence that Pharaoh's daughter was down there bathing at the exact moment that this little basket with a baby in it would come floating down the river. Pharaoh's daughter sees it coming. She tells one of her servant girls to go get it for her and bring it to her. So they get it and, I guess, float it on over there to her. When she looks in it, it's a baby. It's a baby boy, and he's crying. And she knows immediately that it's got to be one of the Hebrew women's babies. And it had to be a mother that was trying to a last-ditch effort to try to save her baby. So she has compassion on baby Moses, and she picks him up, and she says she's going to keep him. She names him Moses. Well, his sister's still standing over here, and his sister says, "Hey, do you need me to go find a Hebrew lady to nurse this baby for you?" And she says yes. And I can just see Moses' sister running just as fast as she can and just throwing that door open to her house and saying, "Mama, Mama, you'll never guess what happened." And tells her mother, "Come on, you've got to go meet Pharaoh's daughter. She rescued Moses, and she's going to keep him, and you're going to get to nurse him. You're going to get to keep him for a while." Can you imagine? In his mother's wildest dreams, where she had ever thought that things would turn out like they did. And that's just another testament to how good God is. Even when Moses was in his mama's belly, God had a plan for Moses. And no matter what the Pharaoh decreed was going to happen, it didn't matter. God had a plan for Moses' life. And just like God has a plan for Moses' life, he's got a plan for your life too. So they go back. They rush back to Pharaoh's daughter. So Pharaoh's daughter asked her, "Yes, will you take him and feed him, nurse him, take care of him, and then you can bring him back to me." So we don't really know how old Moses was when his mother had to bring him back. He could have been a year old, he could have been 2, he could have been 3. We're not sure, but God was good enough to give Moses' mother more time with him. Once she brings him back to the Pharaoh's daughter, we don't know. He just grew up. He was probably your average little kid running around there getting into something, and then he turned into a teenager, and we don't hear anything else about him until he's about 40. And it says he was out among the people one day, and when he was out among the people, he saw an Egyptian beating up an Israelite. And he was just really tired of the way that Pharaoh and his people was doing the Israelites. He was just tired of it. He was mad, and then he saw this Egyptian beating up this Israelite. Well, he kills the Egyptian. And then he hides him in the sand. And he thinks nobody knows about it. Well, he comes to find out a little while later, there's 2 others fighting, and he's over there wanting, fussing and fighting. He won't know, what are y'all fussing and fighting about, He just don't understand it. They just need to get along. Well, one of them turns around and says, "Well, what are you going to do? You going to kill us like you did that Egyptian?" And Moses wigs out because he thinks, if they know that I killed that man, I bet Pharaoh knows. And Pharaoh knew. And Pharaoh wanted to kill him. So what did Moses do? Moses ran. He was a lot like Jonah at that time. He ran. He got him some gone, and he ended up in a place called Midian. So it says when he got to Midian, though, that he went to a well, and there was like 7 sisters there. And there were some shepherds that come up, and they were being rude, and they were kind of pushing the ladies aside, and, just not being very nice at all. So we see for the 3rd time that Moses kind of come to the women's rescue. It seems that that's kind of Moses' character, is to want to intervene when somebody's being treated unfairly, that he wants to rescue people. He wants to help people. So he steps in there and he takes up for these ladies, and he helps them do what they need to do, and I'm sure they thank him and they leave. But when they get home, they tell their daddy about this kind man that defended them and took up for them and helped them. And their daddy says, well, go back and get him. Why didn't you bring him with you? So they go back and get him, bring him back. Their daddy ends up giving one of his daughters to Moses to marry. So Moses marries. He stays there with them there in Midian. And he's out in the desert. It says he's out in the desert with his flock. He's got his, I guess he's got his little cane or his little stick that they use, shepherd stick. But he says he's out there, and he sees a bush that's on fire out in the middle of the desert. Just a bush, just burning, but it's not burning up. And he was sitting there looking at it thinking, that's just strange. Why is that bush burning, but it's not burning up? So he starts walking closer to this burning bush. And from within that burning bush, God calls him by name. Twice. Moses. Moses. And he tells him to take off his sandals because he's standing on holy ground. And can you imagine what Moses felt like at that moment? This is where God would tell Moses what he intended for him to do. This is where Moses learned his purpose and his plan that God created him for all along. And that time had come. And it was his time to lead God's people out of Egypt and to the promised land. So that's where we're going to stop today. That's the next week. I'll come back and we'll get into some of the adventures that Moses had. We'll get into the plagues that God sent to Egypt to talk Pharaoh into letting them Israelites go. So we'll get into more of that next week. But I want y'all to just think about this story and just remember that God has a plan for you, even though you may be 4, you may be 6, you may be 8, 10, whatever age you are, that God's got a plan for you and he's got a purpose for you. And don't forget that, okay? And I'll talk to y'all next week.